Welcome to the deep dive. And before we even get into the stack of notes and sources we have on the desk today, I really just want to offer a divine blessing for your day and honestly for your entire week. May you find inspiration, peace, and purpose in whatever you are setting your hands to do today. We are so glad you are joining us for this conversation.
Yeah, it is genuinely a privilege to be digging into this material with you all,
Yeah.
especially because it takes a concept we think we understand and just completely turns it inside out.
It really does. So today, we have our notes and excerpts open from two distinct biblical commentaries. We're looking at the Holman Study Bible, which is, fantastic for historical and grammatical context.
Right, the real foundational stuff.
Exactly. We're looking at that alongside the NAA, which is the Nova Almeida Atualizada Study Bible.
Correct.
For those who might not know, the NAA is a modern Portuguese translation, and its commentary offers this incredibly sharp sociolinguistic lens.
It's so good. It often highlights the pragmatic, community-focused aspects of the ancient text in a way that just pairs perfectly with the Holman.
It does, and our target for this deep dive is a very specific piece of ancient literature. We are looking at Exodus chapter 31.
Which, on the surface, it sounds like a highly specific architectural blueprint.
Yeah.
But the underlying themes are actually foundational to how we understand human output.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive has a dual focus. First, we're going to uncover a fascinating ancient perspective on art, craftsmanship, and what it actually means to be divinely inspired.
The fun stuff.
The fun stuff, yeah. And second, we're going to unpack a radical ancient law about resting that carried a literal death penalty.
Which is quite a pivot for one chapter.
It's a huge pivot. We usually think of spiritual gifts as things like preaching, leading, or maybe prophecy. But this text flips that entirely on its head. It defines spiritual giftedness as the ability to cut stones, weave fabric, and forge metal. Okay, let's unpack this, starting right at the beginning of the chapter where the text names the people put in charge of this massive project.
Right, because the text doesn't just put out a general call for volunteers or ask who has a good eye for design. It specifically names two individuals, Bezalel from the tribe of Judah and Oholiab from the tribe of Dan.
And that tribal detail is not accidental at all.
No, not at all. Judah was the leading, most prominent tribe, while Dan was a significantly minor, almost peripheral tribe. By pairing them together, the text is subtly communicating a democratization of divine calling.
It spans the entire social hierarchy of the ancient Israelites.
Exactly.
That immediately reframes the whole operation. It's not just an elite class of priests doing the holy work. But what really stood out to me in these commentaries is the specific language used to describe Bezalel. The text says he is filled with the Spirit of God.
Yeah, that phrase is huge.
It is, because for anyone familiar with ancient religious texts, seeing someone filled with the Spirit almost always precedes a massive miraculous event, like parting a sea or delivering a bold prophetic judgment. But here, it precedes a massive arts and crafts project.
What's fascinating here is how the NAA commentary specifically unpacks that phrase. It points out that in this context, being filled with the Spirit, the Hebrew word is ruach, means something incredibly pragmatic.
Pragmatic how?
It means being specifically qualified and empowered for a tangible physical task. The commentary connects this to another ancient text, Micah chapter 3, verse 8, noting that the Spirit gives power for tasks that aim at the well-being and structural integrity of the community.
So divine inspiration isn't just about lofty theology or having a religious experience. It's about the very real physical environment of the people.
Think about the linguistic connection to the very beginning of the Hebrew Bible. In Genesis, that same ruach, the Spirit of God, is hovering over the chaos of the unformed earth, bringing order and creating the cosmos.
Wow. Okay.
Now in Exodus 31, that same creative spirit is filling a human being, Bezalel, to create a microcosmos. The tabernacle they are building is designed to be a miniature, ordered representation of God's perfect creation. God is essentially sharing his identity as the ultimate creator with a human artisan.
That perfectly sets up another phrase that the Holman notes highlight. It describes these artisans as being wise of heart, which is interesting because when I think of ancient wisdom literature, I usually think of navigating society, being a good friend, or avoiding foolish arguments.
The Holman notes provide some brilliant linguistic context on that exact assumption. If you look at texts like the book of Proverbs, the words for wisdom and understanding are almost exclusively applied to relationship skills and moral navigation.
Right, how to be a good person.
Exactly. But in Exodus 31, those exact same Hebrew words are repurposed to refer to hands-on, physical abilities.
Like blueprints and building.
The capacity to construct architecture, the talent to smelt raw, stubborn ore into beautiful objects. The text makes a profound theological statement here. God didn't just drop off a pile of gold, silver, and wood.
He supplied the specific intellectual and physical capacities required to manipulate those elements, which they desperately needed because the sheer scale of the work outlined here is staggering. To give you listening a sense of what this wisdom of heart had to produce, the text gives a massive checklist. They had to build the tent of meeting, the Ark of the Testimony, and the mercy seat.
And that mercy seat was critical.
It really was. Just to clarify for you, the mercy seat wasn't just a decorative lid for a box. In their theology, it was the literal, physical focal point of atonement. It was the space where the divine intersected with humanity. If you build that wrong, you are messing with the cosmic balance of the community.
The pressure on these artisans was immense. Beyond the ark, they had to forge the pure gold lampstand, the altars of incense and burnt offering, and the bronze basins. Keep in mind, this is Bronze Age metallurgy.
No power tools.
No power tools, no digital thermometers. They were using fire, rudimentary bellows, and raw physical strength to execute exact, meticulous specifications.
And if being master metallurgists and woodworkers wasn't enough, they also had to be master tailors and chemists. They had to weave the finely detailed sacred garments for the priests and compound the anointing oil and fragrant incense. So God essentially recruits an ancient general contractor and says, here is the blueprint for a multidisciplinary masterpiece.
It was an absolute mobilization of labor, resources, and intense focus. You can just imagine the bustling, noisy, high-stakes environment of this ancient construction site.
Thinking about the sheer scale of this ancient manufacturing, it makes the next part of the chapter completely jarring. Here's where it gets really interesting. Right after detailing all these physical things to be built, the text suddenly hits the brakes, hard.
Whiplash, really.
Total whiplash. It pivots completely away from the tabernacle and drops a strict, uncompromising law about observing the Sabbath. Why interrupt the blueprint for the most sacred objects in their culture with a mandatory rest day?
It feels like a non sequitur to a modern reader, but it is deeply intentional. The Holman notes dive into the word study here. The Hebrew word we translate as Sabbath is related to the verb shaveth, which simply means to cease. It designates a specific day of the week where all work absolutely, categorically must stop.
And to understand why this is here, we have to look at the historical context of the ancient Near East.
Right, because this wasn't just a cultural norm they were borrowing from their neighbors.
Far from it.
The commentaries point out that there is no clear parallel for this kind of Sabbath culture anywhere else in the ancient world. It was a massive historical anomaly. If you read other ancient creation myths from the surrounding cultures, like the Babylonian Enuma Elish,
the gods are portrayed as creating human beings for one specific reason, right?
to do the grunt work. Humans were created as agricultural slaves to dig canals and farm, specifically so the gods could rest and enjoy themselves.
The gods kick their feet up and humans do the heavy lifting forever.
That was the prevailing worldview. But the Israelite text completely flips the script. The God of the Israelites demands that the humans rest.
Wow.
The idea of a mandatory universal day off, where even the animals and the lowest servants got to cease their labor, was unheard of. It was a theological revolution.
So what does this all mean for the ancient Israelites practically? Why is this forced cessation of work so central?
If we synthesize the notes from both the NAA and Holman commentaries, the Sabbath rests on two massive foundational pillars. First is the foundation of creation.
Right.
As the Exodus text states, God made the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. The commentary notes this establishes a built-in rhythm woven into the very fabric of how the universe operates. You cannot endlessly produce without breaking down the machine.
A biological and cosmic necessity.
Exactly. But the second foundation is even more immediate to their situation, which is liberation. The Holman notes bring in context from Deuteronomy, pointing out that the Sabbath is deeply tied to their recent liberation from slavery in Egypt. A slave never gets a day off.
No.
A slave's entire worth is defined by their endless economic production. By commanding a Sabbath, God was instituting a weekly physical sign that they were no longer slaves. Free people have the right, and in this case, the divine obligation to stop working.
Which makes it a profound act of sanctification. The text says the Sabbath is a sign so that they may know it is the Lord who sanctifies them, who sets them apart. Keeping the Sabbath was the primary external action that visibly separated them from all the surrounding empires.
Right.
By stopping their work, they were actively remembering their identity as a chosen, liberated people.
It moved theology from an abstract idea into a deep, experiential bodily knowledge. Your muscles physically experienced the freedom God provided.
But wait, this brings us to what might be the most shocking part of this text for a modern reader. We are talking about rest and liberation, but verses 14 and 15 do not mess around.
No, they don't.
The text states that anyone who profanes the Sabbath, anyone who does any work on that day, will be put to death or cut off from their people. That is an incredibly severe penalty.
The NAA commentary provides some vital analysis on the severity of this judgment. The phrases putting to death and being cut off point to the individual being utterly eliminated from the community. But the commentary adds nuance, noting that this judgment could take several forms within their societal structure.
Okay, like what?
Well, could be execution at the hands of the congregation enforcing its highest law. It could imply a direct smiting by the Lord. Or it could mean suffering a total devastating separation from the benefits of the covenant, essentially being exiled.
Wow.
And in the harsh environment of the ancient Near East, being ostracized from your community was often a slow death sentence in itself.
I have to push back on this, though, or at least play devil's advocate for a second. We just spent the first half of the chapter talking about how building this tabernacle is the most holy, spirit-filled thing they could possibly do.
Right.
Wouldn't working on the tabernacle straight through the Sabbath be seen as a sign of extreme devotion? Like, look how dedicated I am to God's house. Why penalize that with death?
Because of what the act of working represented in their covenant. The commentary explains that breaking the Sabbath wasn't viewed as a simple scheduling error, or even a moment of overenthusiasm for the tabernacle project. It was viewed as an obstinate rebellion against the sovereign Lord.
Rebellion.
Yes, God had just miraculously freed them and given them this rhythm of life. To refuse to rest meant you were refusing to acknowledge God's past provisions.
It's essentially saying, I don't actually trust you to keep the universe running while I take a break. I have to do it myself.
That is exactly the heart of it. It's a refusal to trust Him for future provisions. If you feel you have to work 7 days a week to survive or even to build God's house, you are ultimately relying entirely on your own strength.
We're putting yourself in the place of God.
You are putting yourself in the position of the divine. For the ancient Israelites, the Sabbath was the ultimate test of trust. To work on the Sabbath was to publicly declare that you did not trust the covenant. It was high treason against the very agreement that made them a people.
So God essentially gives them this incredible blueprint, but attaches a supernatural OSHA regulation with the ultimate penalty. You have this incredible mandate to build holy objects, but the moment you prioritize the work of building them over the rest commanded by the God you're building them for, you've completely lost the plot.
It is a profound tension between human effort and divine reliance. And it all culminates beautifully in the very last verse of this chapter, verse 18. After God finishes speaking all these instructions with Moses on Mount Sinai, the blueprints for the artisans, the strict, uncompromising laws of the Sabbath, He hands Moses the 2 tablets of the testimony.
The 10 Commandments. And the detail the text includes here is striking. It specifies that these stone tablets were written by the literal finger of God.
Yes.
After a whole chapter talking about the hands of human artisans, Bezalel smelting bronze and Oholiab carving wood, we get this incredible visceral image of God's own hand carving the stone of the law.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a brilliant poetic contrast. Humans are tasked with building the physical containers, the tabernacle and the ark. Their skill is elevated, democratized, and celebrated as a direct impartation of the divine spirit.
But God Himself writes the actual terms of the relationship.
Exactly. Human effort constructs the space, but divine revelation dictates the reality of the covenant. The finger of God detail ensures there is no confusion about who is ultimately authoring their society.
It is a profound journey we've just taken through a single chapter. For you listening, I hope it's shifted how you view both your work and your downtime. We've contrasted the beautiful, spirit-empowered productivity of ancient artisans with the absolute life-or-death necessity of hitting the pause button. We see an ancient worldview where creativity and building are divine gifts, but where endless productivity without rest is viewed as a fatal, arrogant rebellion.
This raises an important question, and it's something I think is worth mulling over long after we wrap up here today. If the ancient Israelites viewed the refusal to rest not just as a bad habit, but as an ultimate act of rebellion against the designer of the universe, how might we view our modern, hyper-productive culture?
Oh, that's good.
We live in a society where being constantly busy, constantly reachable, and constantly optimizing our output is worn as a badge of honor. What if the most radical, spiritually profound thing you could do this week isn't to work harder or build something bigger, but to intentionally and completely stop?
Taking that pause might just be the most rebellious thing you can do today. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. As we close out our time together, I want to say goodbye by reminding you that God blesses all the listeners. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will catch you next time.